Every era has its scammers. But here's what should genuinely worry you. Some of history's most successful con artists weren't back-alley grifters. They were trusted by kings, funded by governments, and worshipped by entire cities. This is the real history of ancient and medieval scams. And I promise some of these schemes are more elaborate, more profitable, and more insane than anything running on the internet today. Let's start with a scam so successful it lasted almost 2 decades and fooled an actual Roman governor. In the 2nd century AD, a Greek con artist named Alexander of Abonoteichus built a fake prophetic god from scratch. He planted a tame snake with a fake human-like head made of painted linen inside a hollowed egg, revealed it to a crowd as a newly hatched deity named Glycon, and then spent the next several years running an oracle business, charging pilgrims real money for prophecies spoken through the snake, using a hidden tube and a voice actor in another room. Here's the part that should really bother you. This wasn't some obscure backwater superstition nobody took seriously. Alexander's oracle became famous across the Roman Empire. Roman senators consulted it. A Roman governor consulted it. The philosopher Lucian, who personally investigated Alexander and called the entire operation an elaborate fraud in writing, described crowds so large that people were injured trying to get close to the living god. One puppet snake, one linen mask, and a business that outlasted most modern startups. If you think a fake prophetic snake is impressive, wait until you hear what happened to actual physical objects believed to be sacred. The medieval relic trade was, structurally, one of the most profitable and long-running scam economies in human history. Churches and monasteries across Europe competed for pilgrim traffic, and pilgrim traffic meant money, donations, lodging fees, souvenir sales. The fastest way to attract pilgrims was to claim you had a genuinely miraculous relic, a saint's bone, a splinter of the true cross, a vial of a martyr's blood. The math got absurd fast. Historians have documented enough surviving splinters of the true cross across medieval Europe that, if you combine them all, you'd have enough wood to build several actual crosses, a fact medieval critics themselves joked about at the time. John Calvin, centuries later, wrote an entire satirical treatise cataloging the sheer volume of duplicate relics circulating across Europe, sarcastically noting there seemed to be enough true nails from the crucifixion to open a hardware store. And this wasn't a few isolated frauds, it was an entire supply chain. Relic dealers, sometimes called pardoners or relic mongers, traveled between towns selling bones of dubious origin, often purchased in bulk from graveyards or battlefields and marketed with an invented backstory. The Fourth Lateran Council in 1215, the same council that ended trial by ordeal, also had to formally crack down on relic fraud, which tells you exactly how large and out of control the problem had become by then. So fake gods and fake bones, but nothing beats convincing a king you can turn lead into gold. Alchemists occupied a strange, extremely lucrative gray zone in medieval and Renaissance courts. Genuine chemistry was still developing, so nobody could definitively disprove the central promise that with the right process, base metals could be transmuted into gold. Alchemists exploited that uncertainty for centuries, and the wealthiest, most desperate clients were often kings themselves, desperate to fund wars without raising taxes. One of history's most spectacular examples, a con artist working under Holy Roman Emperor Rudolf II convinced the emperor's court that gold transmutation was not only possible, but imminent, extracting funding for years through staged demonstrations. Techniques like hiding gold flakes inside a hollow stirring rod or a false bottom crucible so that new gold appeared to form during the process when it had simply been planted in advance. When alchemists were eventually exposed, the consequences could be genuinely brutal. Some were executed, occasionally by being hanged from gallows specially gilded in fake gold, a darkly literal punishment for the crime. But here's the uncomfortable part. For every alchemist caught, Historians believe many more operated for years, even decades, protected by powerful patrons who badly wanted to believe the con was real. Royal courts and religious pilgrims were lucrative targets, but ordinary Romans had their own extremely specific scam to worry about: their own will. Testamentary fraud, forging or manipulating a will, was common enough in ancient Rome that Roman law developed detailed legal categories specifically to deal with it. Forgers would fabricate an entire will, naming themselves or a client as heir to a wealthy, conveniently already deceased Roman citizen, sometimes using forged seals or bribed witnesses to make the document appear legitimate. The scale of this problem is honestly staggering. The Roman jurist Ulpian and other legal writers described will forgery as common enough to require its own specialized courts and formal legal remedies. Professional document forgers existed specifically to serve this market. For a fee, they could fabricate a convincing will, complete with forged signatures and counterfeit wax seals matching a deceased person's actual seal ring, which they'd often obtained through bribery or theft before the body was even properly buried. Rome eventually created harsh formal penalties for will forgery, including exile or execution for convicted forgers, a sign of exactly how widespread and financially devastating the practice had become for wealthy Roman families. And if you think targeting a will is cold, wait until you hear who ancient medicine sellers were targeting. Literally everyone, with the same fake cure. Theriac, a supposed universal antidote and cure-all, originally developed with some genuine, if limited, pharmacological basis in the ancient world, evolved over centuries into one of history's longest-running miracle cure scams. By the medieval and early modern period, genuine Theriac was claimed to cure poison, plague, and nearly any disease you could name, and demand made it hugely profitable to fake. Venice became so associated with a supposedly superior version, called Venice Treacle, that entire public Theriac-making ceremonies were staged in city squares specifically to reassure buyers the product was authentic, a medieval marketing stunt, essentially, to combat rampant counterfeiting. And the counterfeiting was rampant. Cheaper imitation batches using inferior or entirely fake ingredients circulated constantly, sold at genuine Theriac prices to customers with no realistic way to verify what they were actually buying. This is, structurally, the direct ancestor of the snake oil salesman, a real-sounding compound, wildly overstated claims, wrapped in enough ceremony and reputation that customers stopped asking questions. Here's what ties every single one of these together. None of these scams required advanced technology, sophisticated hacking, or modern manipulation tactics. Every one of them ran on exactly two things: a plausible-sounding story and a target too invested, too hopeful, or too proud to ask the obvious, skeptical question. Alexander's oracle worked because pilgrims wanted to believe a god was speaking to them. The relic trade worked because towns wanted the prestige and income of hosting something miraculous. Alchemists thrived because desperate kings wanted an easy answer to empty treasuries. Will forgery worked because grieving families rarely questioned a document with the right seals. And Theriac worked because sick, frightened people will pay almost anything for a cure that sounds credible. So the next time you see a wildly overconfident claim online, a miracle cure, a guaranteed investment, a prophecy, remember, the format has barely changed in 2,000 years. We've just swapped the fake snake god for a slicker website, and the Gilded Gallows for a strongly worded terms of service page nobody reads. If you think a fake prophetic snake is impressive, wait until next time. We're covering the history of ancient trash talk and insult culture, and some of these historical burns are genuinely savage. Subscribe so you don't miss it.
Make sure to subscribe for more epic content. And click that bell icon too.